What's going on, Men's Health Unscripted? We have a really exciting interview today. We have Bill Ranshaw. He has really extensive knowledge on porn, masturbation, all these crazy taboo subjects that we're going to talk about today. Bill, thank you for coming on, and tell us a little bit about yourself. What do our viewers need to know? What are your qualifications? Let's just get down to it.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate both you guys having me on here and introducing this subject as exciting. So that is actually a fun way to introduce the topic of porn, masturbation, and things that it can do to you. So we are going to make this, light, hopefully entertaining, maybe at least just to me and you guys. Who knows, anybody else will find it. But quick qualifications is I can give you the me now. And then we'll get into the me before from the last 30 years. I'm currently a men's coach around specifically porn and sex addiction recovery. I am certified in that, got certified this year. And I am also a 3-time Emmy winning content producer for shows or stuff that we did for here locally in Denver, Colorado on PBS here. And so I also have a documentary film that we released last year. And so people, if they want to look me up, they can find out information on that. Last year also became engaged to the love of my life. So I want guys that know that this is a problem in their life and don't think that that's ever possible. That is absolutely possible and was one of the driving forces for me to get through this. Also became financially independent through all of this. And this is in a short 4 years since I quit porn. So I'm now 49. The last day that I watched porn and masturbation was March 21st, 2017. So wow. That's the now going on 4 years.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there who be like, man, that guy's crazy.
So yeah, they're like, that's insane.
How was it living?
Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
So the years leading up to that, I am the stereotypical guy who just started watching porn young at around age 10. Sometimes I'll say 9 to 11 somewhere on my, my videos, but I'm roughly 10 years old. And I didn't first have sex till I was 19. So there was 8 years of my formidable years of just, trial and error, sexual education, all through porn. And I was introduced to, at the time, what would be considered hardcore porn. My dad had bought one of those satellites that go in the backyard, the big giant ones that turn around and make the noise, you can hear it. And also, the thing about satellite TV back then, it was like channel 3, like cable was. So every TV in the house, if you turned to channel 3, you saw it was on the satellite. So I'd be flipping through channels, and then lo and behold, I see, well, my dad's downstairs. It looks like he's watching porn. And so at least I knew that it was out there. And so it was one of those things where you just wait for the parents to leave the house, nobody's home, and those triggers, the dopamine starts rushing, you start watching porn. And so that was my life. And then the first time I have sex, I actually have a video where I talk explicitly about my whole first time having sex. And it was awkward to say the least, as it is for most men, but I didn't orgasm. And, looking back, I think, man, that, it was just a fluke or that's just the way first times are. But I jokingly say I can count on one hand up until about 4 years ago, how many times I orgasmed from sex.
So let me ask you a question with that. So when you're saying orgasm, just to kind of clarify, are you talking about, I'm going to use some layman terms here. Are you talking about that you didn't bust the nut, or are you saying that you did bust the nut, but it wasn't like as enjoyable or as like complete?
Yeah, great question, Cam. It was, I did not orgasm from sex unless it was me masturbating or the girl jerking me off. That was it. Or
so
a possible
there was no like
blowjob.
semen production? Like
no, I couldn't, there was semen production, but I couldn't do it from vaginal entry. Okay. Just regular sex, I couldn't do it. I could go and go and go and go and go and go. But if I wanted to orgasm, I had to pull over and I just had to finish myself off, or she'd have to. And there's so many times in my life where I was in one group and they were talking about this, and some guy asked, this is kind of taboo, but has anybody ever faked an orgasm? And I commented, I'm like, most of my life I faked orgasms. And because I always had, and that was one reason that, thank God that was one reason I actually always wore a condom, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to orgasm from sex. So I would fake an orgasm, roll over, lay there for a minute, rest, and then pretend like I'm ready for round two and pull the condom off, and then start playing around, via hand with a girl. And then she'd jerk me off and I'd orgasm, like, oh, he orgasmed again. Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm the best.
Yeah, but no, it wasn't. I faked the orgasm and then would do the second one, by masturbation or by a hand job or something like that. And, it didn't really affect me. I'll back it up. And again, like I'm so stereotypical of so many men out there. I grew up shy, an introvert, and I grew up skinny. I would have been the first guy to marry any girl that ever talked to me, say through high school. I would have fallen in love with any girl that like just smiled at me. And so growing up, I'd always end up in the friend zone, even in my early years in college. I'm the friend zone guy. I was that guy. And, I didn't equate porn to anything, but it eventually turned to a life of sex addiction. And what I attributed that to was I started working out once I got to college. I really wanted to meet women, but I was so shy. So I taught myself to country dance. I was living in Arizona at the time. And so I could country dance and have girls approach me at the bar. And so then I could dance all night and I was getting this attention. And then after, then certainly then it was about the 90s, mid 90s or so, the internet really just started coming out and about. And so that was really what changed everything for me. I really honed in my skills on how to pick up women via the internet. At the time, it was like AOL chat rooms. And it was just,
That brings me
and
back.
I had oh, it goes way back.
The 10-minute CD.
Yeah, well, I even did a pamphlet. This was way before PayPal or anything. And the computer I had it on crashed many years ago. I still wish I had it. But it was about a 10-page pamphlet, so to speak, of how to get laid online. And the process was so long. Like I would have these stages of introduction and then a stage of where you're talking to women for a while. And then, so you'd have 3 or 4 going at one time. And the third one was how you close it, like a very long process. And so, kind of how it progressed throughout the years of the internet, and I shared this on another medium, not for the first time a while ago, is kind of the process of how porn led into sex addiction and how the internet played in that is, early on, guys are always kind of known as either being creepy, hitting on girls online, hey, let's hook up, let's do all those kind of things. Well, later in life, I realized that this was pure dopamine and brain science at work. So dopamine is always, trying to find faster ways for a new reward. That's what dopamine does in your brain.
Yeah,
and
that's a great way of putting it. It's like
Pavlov dogging us ourselves, though.
Yeah, that's what we do. And so, so regular sex was becoming more boring throughout the years. And so I was always trying to figure out that time frame. How do I close that gap from the time I talk to a girl online to the time I'm hooking up? And so it got down to the point of it could be an hour, if that, have a conversation. Hey, door's open, come on in. And then within an hour, I'm banging a girl that I just talked to.
So you had been noting all of this. So you had made this, I'm going to call it an algorithm. You made this algorithm and then we're running it online. So early AOL, you weren't even meeting them. You were running pre-Tinder before it existed. Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly what it was. And when the dating sites came back around, so the first, it was like country music chat room I was in, and then Arizona chat room, and talking to girls, moving to private messages. I had it down to the type on how to be charming, using colon and smiley faces and all that, how to engage a woman, but in a non-threatening way. And just the process of hooking up, like what guys do. And I was able to kind of master that online. And then when the years of the dating sites came out, it really slammed the door open, because now you just have this plethora of a spinning wheel of women that you can talk to. And same thing, it was always trying to see how I could make it faster. In the beginning, it was like conversation, talking to them, God, this is taking a month sometimes to make this happen, get together. And then this is so far off subject, but I thought I'd be talking about let it go where it goes. And so, is the algorithm that came up online was, okay, so I don't want to be creepy. I don't want to be threatening to a woman. How can I approach a woman online and make her feel comfortable and not threatened, but still intrigued? And it led off with a conversation. I would flirt with a couple words. Hey, you look really cute, make it, a joke. And if I could feel a little vibe, I would say something, you wouldn't mind if I shared a fetish with you, would you? Well, most girls are like, oh, what's the fetish? And so I would proceed then. But if a girl said, no, I'm not, I don't really want to hear anything, boom, I shut it down right there and realize, okay, I'm not gonna proceed any farther and, let somebody know what a weirdo I am. So if they said, what is your fetish? And this is what I boiled it down to after like years of trial and error of different conversations. But it was, I have a fetish of masturbating in front of a woman, me completely naked while she's completely dressed, sitting on the couch across the room from me. And that was it. And most women were really intrigued by that. It was non-threatening because it had nothing to do with them. I was not asking for their involvement or anything. And it really wasn't so much about the masturbation. It's not that I really just wanted to masturbate in front of them, but I learned that was non-threatening and a lot of women were intrigued by it. And I was turned on by the fact that a woman would actually like to watch that. But whenever you get in a room with a woman in front of her naked, jerking off, 99% of the time they start getting aroused and you just ask them if they want to join in. That was my procedure online. And it worked, and I was hooking up all the time. It could be multiple times in a day. Occasionally, it could be a couple girls at one time, however it worked out. So, I mean, that was an algorithm that I went. So really, it became sport. So, fucking was fun. It became sport. It was stuff that I could brag about. And there's so many things around it. But at this point in time, I never equated it to porn. It was me being the shy guy who now has kind of cracked the code on to hook up with women that so many guys are trying to figure out.
Now that's super interesting because it sounds like, so we're going to put a little pause here because we might have to edit this out later. I don't know how this stuff works. But it sounds like you were trying to pull, you developed the Louis C.K. method, from what I call it, in order to hope it's going to bring somebody in. Yeah. But you'd actually did it well before, and you're actually able to test it and find out that it sometimes worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. To the point where it worked out most all the time. And is what I found that I was actually seeking out and finding women that were very much like me. They were probably closed off, not willing to be vulnerable, afraid of getting hurt, because that was what I ended up hiding through all of this was, fear of getting hurt or rejection or anything. And in my mind, it was like, well, if they reject me, it's because of this crazy notion of thing I want to do. It's not me personally. It's like they're just not interested in some sexual thing. And so it wasn't an actual rejection of me. But if they were into it, it's like, okay, cool. They're kind of into this. And it was different. But it would always end up usually, again, ending in masturbation or them jerking me off, or sometimes I wouldn't even orgasm and I'd go home and have to watch porn to orgasm. And I'll back this up that I call myself, I was a casual porn user. And that's not to diminish or make light of people who are, have real true addictions around this. And it was still an addiction to me because I wasn't able to stop it or see how it was harming me. But it's on a varying scale, and I don't want to call it lighter than, or worse than, or better than for some men, because no matter how little or how much you do it, if it's causing negative effects in your life, it's bad. Some of the guys I coach, they go on binges of 6, 7, 8 hours a night, 2-3 days in a row on a weekend.
Hours?
Yes, wow. Hours. And it's purely a drug. It's men that are doing this and they know I want to stop. I mean, it's like some guy just sitting, either drinking alcohol all night or ripping lines of blow all night. You just start doing it. After a while, you're like, I'm not even getting anything out of this, but I'm still doing it. I'm still drawn to do it. And there's so many aspects around that on the brain on why that happens and our psyche and a whole different lot of reasons around it why we do that.
I didn't forget the physical damage. Like that's a lot of friction right there. Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, you could start a lot of fires that way, I think. So.
Right now it's cold, so I don't know, might need some of that activity, but man.
So So in the younger years, I'll give you the progression. So when you're young, and this is what's the challenge with most men, and Patrick, you alluded to this, I think offline, and we can talk about this in a minute, is it's so alarming now because men at such early ages are now going to doctors for erectile dysfunction.
Right.
And being prescribed, ED drugs and all these type of things, and nobody knows why, and nobody's examining porn. And I always tell people, because people say, "How am I addicted?" or whatever, and it's not my job to tell people or prove to people that porn is bad. No, there's so many people out there that know it is. I'm there for those people that know it's bad for them and they need help. So many times, especially on Instagram, a lot of people try to troll me into these conversations of me trying to prove to me that porn is great. Great if porn is great for you. Until such time it's not, then you know where to find me. Until you realize finally what it's done. You try to get into a relationship, and now you can't become intimately connected. Now you're having erectile dysfunction in a relationship. Now you've got brain fog. Now you feel numb. Now you're depressed. You can't function at work. You can't connect with clients. All these certain things start showing up. So I asked people, I said, if you have tried everything in your life to become successful and be optimal, such as you've read every motivational book, every motivational video, you've gone to seminars, Tony Robbins, anything, and you've done it all, and you can't still figure out why you can't get that success. I always tell men, just consider the role porn is having in your life. Just consider it and open that door up to that train of thought.
Well, yeah, so I do want to go back because I know we kind of hit on it a little bit. We kind of introduced each other pre-podcast, but this whole kind of concept of porn being like really damaging to guys. I was listening to a radio talk show one day, like randomly had it on in my car, and they were talking about how destructive porn was. Like somebody called in and it was like, what's like the weirdest thing you've heard about? I don't know, whatever, like morning show stuff. And it was like, some guy called in and was like, porn is really just damaging youthful men, all these issues happening. And like 2 weeks before I had heard that on the radio, I have a couple friends that are nurses here in Tampa, and they know that I have a men's health podcast. They're like, you need to like bring this up at some point, because it's really becoming an issue where guys are coming into our office, they're being prescribed ED meds, they're 27, they're otherwise healthy, like normal, labs and blood pressure and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they just, when they get with an actual partner, a physical partner is there with them, they can't get an erection.
Mm-hmm.
They just can't, like, there's no performance there whatsoever. And I really kind of thought that was really interesting. And then I saw you, and I was like, there might be something to this, and that's why I really wanted to have you on and get your perspective on it. And clearly, like, you've had quite the journey, going from your youth to where you are now. I just think that's like very interesting. So maybe discuss with us a little bit about like the neurological effects of porn, and like we can get a little bit more scientific as far as like yes, okay, we've established that this could potentially have a negative effect on your life. So in your brain, what exactly is this doing, per your experience?
Oh, Patrick, I love that question, because this is really where I work with a lot of guys. Because once you can understand the brain and what's actually going on, because most guys, this is going on, they're like, I'm fucked up, I'm broken, like there's something wrong with me. If you can step back and realize, no, this is the brain doing what the brain does. And once you have awareness of how it's working, then you can kind of reverse it and untangle it and scientifically put procedures and systems in place to kind of work your way out of it. And so why that erectile dysfunction is happening, there's a few things at play here. And especially throughout the formidable years, the teen years, there's a couple of things that's going on, but your limbic system is developing in your brain throughout your teen years. And your limbic system is what you start associating stimulus response to, your behaviors, your automatic behaviors, primarily to fear, to depression, to anxiety. A lot of these negative behaviors are going on. So there's a couple of things that's going on. You have this high threshold of trying to establish baselines for these emotions. The whole while you are exerting massive amounts of dopamine flush to your brain during these same time frames of your life. So a lot of times men unknowingly, not a lot, I mean, all men unknowingly are linking these negative mental states to the outcome of porn. So there's a lot of times where you might be feeling really good, things are going great, and then all of a sudden you might self-sabotage yourself, or you start becoming anxious, or you start getting depressed, or you start feeling anxiety out of nowhere and you don't know why. And then immediately that's a trigger to go watch porn, because your brain has figured out that in moments of distress or stress or of uncertainty or vulnerability, because men are really taught not to be vulnerable, in all these certain states, if these arise, your brain is taught porn's going to take that away.
It's a fallback.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
It's just, and I think a lot of people get caught up in that. I have a very personal relationship with addiction, more so like substance abuse, and just how it's influenced my life. The people that have had this issue and influenced me, and how I perceive it. And it definitely, you can find some people that are recovering addicts that will, everything's fine. Like the whole COVID culture right now.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys and girls that are in recovery, AA, things like that. And the COVID culture of the shutdown and breaking routines, generating anxiety and depression. Well, a lot of them fall back into drugs and alcohol because
It's changed.
You've got people that are out there that have been 10, 20 years sober. COVID hits, and now you're really having these people fall back into old habits because, well, I'm not going to work tomorrow. Yeah. There's no work. I'm just sitting around doing nothing. I can do a little bit of Coke, a couple beers, and the next thing you know, you're full blown back in, where you were before, getting clean.
Yeah.
And
the relapse is hit, Patrick. I'm glad you brought that up, because I am getting a lot of people contacting me through this, and I actually have a video on my YouTube channel that is how to avoid relapse during social distancing or social isolation, and I give like a really detailed plan on how you can kind of stay true to this. That was back in May when I made that video, because it only been a couple months in, and then it's just so hard to do that. And it is like really any addiction. And so my story was, once I stopped porn, I want to get back to more of the brain science around this that we were talking about. But when I stopped porn in 2017, I thought, hey, I'm cured. My life started changing. I started getting some clarity around things, more energy. But then I was in a car accident and blew out my shoulder and had 2 shoulder surgeries and got addicted to opioids. For the first time in my life, I'd been on opioids before from a previous surgery or something, never had an addiction to it. But this time I grew in a massive addiction to opioids over a 4-month time frame, because I was on it 6 times a day through this time period.
Wow.
And I used a lot of my knowledge around getting off of porn to getting off opioids, but I did do it under doctor's supervision, because opioids, you can't just cut cold turkey.
Yeah.
And then after I got off of opioids, I had to, I was burning the candle at both ends. I was doing my sales job, doing a documentary film. So I was working around the clock, not getting much sleep. Lo and behold, for the first time in my life, somebody introduced me to cocaine. And so I started cocaine, and bam, wow.
Jeez.
Yeah. Hallelujah. So, like Chevy Chase in Modern Problems. But the thing you learn with like any addiction or like cocaine, like the best line of cocaine is the first one you ever do, and after that you're always chasing that high. And that goes back to the same thing that porn is your brain is always trying to find a more efficient way to get the new high. And so I use the same thing. So I don't really claim that I work with people with substance addictions, because that's a whole different animal, but a lot of it spills over. And again, another pun intended, a lot of it goes hand in hand. If you're doing porn, you're drinking, you're doing a lot of other stuff as well. So they're not mutually exclusive. And so if you're dealing with one, you're most likely trying to deal with getting something else. And it could be as simple as, caffeine or food or all those type of things. But I work with more primarily sticking around behavioral addictions, such as, gambling, gaming, and those type of things. They all kind of fall into the same category. But going back to the brain, what we were talking about, like why this becomes for men, why they're having these problems, these issues being young, is The other thing that's happening to our brain when we're watching a lot of porn during our youth is, in the old days, the 1800s, before computers, like, human connection was about that chase, that flirting, getting to know somebody, touch, smells, real intimacy and connection with a human being. And that's where sexual arousal is developed and linked.
It's about
And
putting the work in.
yeah, you have to do all of it, and it's all part of the experience. And is what porn has done, it's relinked new triggers and has failed to establish the triggers of old of what real natural biology is with human beings. Like the going back to the days of primates, it was just a natural progression of being aroused and turned on and finding a mate and those type of things. Well, porn has kind of erased that, and you don't get those triggers anymore. So when you're growing up, you're not linking conversation, you're not linking time spent, intimacy moments, joking, laughing, awkwardness, all those things that you should be linking with a woman to sex. Instead, you're building different pathways in your brain of triggers to arousal, which could generally be, there's so many things that I work with guys to start being hypersensitive about their triggers, but it could be time of day. It could be the weather. It could be coming home to an empty house, as I alluded to. You come home, nobody's home. Oh, there's my laptop over there. Or there's a time you sit down at your desk, or you're in your room, you sit down, nobody's around, boom, trigger happens. And it's that moment, time of being. It could be anything. It could be a state of mind. Somebody makes you angry, boom, you're triggered, and you don't know what all your triggers are, but because your brain has been linked this way to porn, and that porn is the outcome to a high reward. And I want to differentiate high reward from an exciting, fun experience. High reward is basically just the brain explosion that you get, because a lot of guys still do it and they're not even happy that they're doing it, but the brain gets that explosion. And going back to the neurology of it is dopamine, and you guys with your background will probably understand this, and is where it's misrepresented most in society is people call it, the pleasure chemical, or they call it the pleasure hormone. And it's usually, people think of it as, if you have an orgasm, dopamine's being released. That's not the case.
Yeah, no.
Dopamine is the animal that's being released upon a trigger. And it's really called the motivational hormone, or the motivational stimulus. And so it's that level that starts building up to the compulsion to watch porn. And so most people link the compulsion or the trigger to maybe seeing a hot chick or whatever it might be. But the trigger could have been an hour before or even a day before, and you don't even know what it was. But that dopamine starts rising to the point now it's hit a level. Now it feels like compulsion that you have to go watch.
Wow.
And equating it to other things in your life, because so many people get when you become a very heavy porn addict, you start losing interest in everything, in all your activities, hobbies, work, relationships, connection, just people in general. And the reason is if you think of normal triggers that people go through for arousal, maybe it's a touch, a girl calls you, she smiles at you, you get a dopamine bump that's maybe level 10 or 15. Well, a porn trigger shoots you up to like level 100. So it starts taking off. So you have these high flush levels of dopamine going through your brain through a lot of triggers that naturally it just dwarfs any other natural dopamine levels in your body. So everything becomes boring and uninteresting, and you're just not motivated by it. And so when you try to quit porn, one of the challenges is people remove that flush, and rather you have to do it over a period of time and realize, let those new baselines arise to where, the 10s and 12s are now feeling like a 100.
Wow.
And so you have to clear that out. But usually when that happens, your brain, you start going through massive depression because your brain is just seeking those levels. Where is it? I need it. That's where you get relapses, and there's so many things. But going back to the point why guys are in erectile dysfunction is because they're watching so much porn, they've not been able to link normal sexual arousal cues to women and that intimacy.
Right. So a huge point that I kind of wanted to discuss with you is, and Cam, like your life might be a little bit different than mine, but as far as like porn goes, like it removes actually having the partner there
Mhm.
on. But then number two, it's they're actors and actresses and they're doing a job. And I think that a lot of people place a lot of sexual and, emotional value on these people that are like, doing a job. And, like they'll say, oh, I've got my favorite porn star and all this kind of.
Mhm.
And what I was going to say is, Cam, your life might be different than mine, but like I've never had like the hot UPS driver come up to my house, or you know what I mean, and say, oh, I got a package for you, big boy. Like that's never happened. And and a lot of porn is built on these scenarios that are like borderline absurd.
Mhm.
True. Now,
Yeah, like I don't know how to pay rent.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like a lot of people out there can't pay rent,
Yeah, I
all
can't
that
pay
good
for your
stuff.
plumbing
Good segue.
services.
it's a good segue. So like I feel like kind of basing on like Patrick was talking about earlier, a lot of this like the porn use of people, it also alters your like social adjustment, your social cues for things. So and it plays out as it plays out.
Well, and that's a great point, Cam. And what porn does to us as far as our view of women. I mean, I really challenged myself with this for a long time because they say porn objectifies women. And I don't feel like that was ever the case with me. I enjoyed women. I respected women. I never wanted to hurt women or take advantage of them. And I can proudly say today, I don't think anybody out there would ever raise their hand and say, hey, Bill took advantage of me in this situation. Like I said, I really tested the waters to make sure that they were in this with me as well. And kind of along this journey. But what it does in our brain is there is that trigger that you see a female that you start thinking, oh yeah, she likes this too, or this is on her mind and those type of things. But ultimately, and we can kind of, this is part of where my recovery comes into play, is focusing on the bare essence really of what porn is doing and what it is. And porn is the complete absence of connection to another human being during a sexual experience.
Yeah.
And when we start engaging in real connection with human beings, and again, you talk about relationships, but this means coworkers, family, whatever it might be, is your brain is being trained at such a high level to be disconnected from humanity. And that's when you start getting those moments of just feeling numb and depressed and like, is this all there is to life? Like there's got to be more to it. And the secret where I help coach guys is not so much focused on being focused as the aspect of, I need to learn how to quit porn. That's going to be part of the process. But the real part of the recovery is instead of learning how to quit porn, you learn how to connect with people and human beings.
Bill, that's like a really great point. I mean, I think that's like super just distilled, awesome point of,
Bumper.
I think it goes back to never had the hot UPS driver girl come to my house, but it really is. But these in a lot of the scenarios, it's supposed to be, I guess how do you put it? They come over. There's no talk. It's just like next thing you know, your pants are unzipped and we're getting after it.
Yeah.
And that's like a really eye-opening point.
Well, and the thing is I was able to manifest those real life situations. I was on the dating sites or Tinder or MySpace back at the time, whatever it might be, of talking to women throughout the day again. And generally they were same thing. They were not sure of who they were. They were scared of being vulnerable. So they were trying to play out their sexuality. So I was finding these type of women and connected to and thinking that that's the way the world is. It's the same way, like, I used to have a bunch of stripper friends back in college and girls they'd inevitably say, all men in this world are going to cheat. All of them, every single one of them. That's their worldview because that's what they're around day in and day out, and not understanding that 90% of the rest of the world, men want to be loyal and provide and be in relationships, but they get the viewpoint of the 10% of the men out there that are in there cheating on their wives and looking to hook up in a strip club. Mine was the same thing. I was finding the women just by the whole scenario that I put out there of finding women that were being attracted to me because they had the same insecurities and walls and everything up that I had. So we connected. And so I would find women that would chat and say, hey, yeah, 6 of my girlfriends are over here at the pool. We want to watch you jerk off. And I go over to the house. I mean, I was creating these porn scenarios where it would happen. And, I'll tell you a funny story on this is one of the times I went to a girl's house, and this was the summertime, hot in Arizona. It was lunchtime from my work. And I walk in and it didn't bother me whatsoever. I pulled my pants down. I was actually really in shape back then too, so that didn't bother me. Very confident the way I looked. But I just started walking around to girls jerking off. There's a few on the other side of the pool that weren't into it. They stayed on the other side of the pool, but there was like 5 or 6 on one side laying in lawn chairs, going just jerking off over there, over the front of them. And the girl that invited me over, again, it sounds like it's really hot, but in the moment it's fun, but like I'm not connecting. There's no connection. There's no intimacy. There's none of that. It's completely void of all of that. But it was interesting. I know this is going to be a great story to tell later. That's what I'm thinking. Well, there was a moment when I actually, ejaculated. I was standing over this girl's shoulder and planning for it to land on her chest. It shot right over and landed in a Doritos bag. So
Frosted Doritos. That cool ranch, boy.
Yeah. But, going to, other stories where I manifested these crazy sexual stories. So there was a girl that I was dating at the time. She worked in a bar and, all the waitresses and the bartender, it was after hours one night. All of us went to a sex club in Phoenix. They were very prevalent there. We ended up coming back to the bar at like 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning. The bartender had the keys to the place. We went inside, started playing Truth or Dare on the dance floor. And all of a sudden it just turned into mayhem. And I'm having sex with 5 girls on a pool table. And I'm like, this is not real, but it's real. And so when people say that stuff doesn't happen, that shit happens. And I don't brag about it anymore. I used to like to brag about it, but it's more so it's just what it is and it's what happened. And I found myself getting in this world of talking to men and trying to, that one-upsmanship. You're at a bar and some guy comes in, oh, I just spent, an hour banging my girlfriend and she, her friend watched. Oh yeah, hold my beer. I got a story for that.
Right. Well, at the same time, people don't take into account where, yeah, that's a cool story. Like I was just like, wow, that's awesome. But at the same time, when does the depression set in? When does the anxiety set in?
Usually post-nut.
The real issue, that kind of clarity. But when are those, issues really starting to set in? And I guess that's a great story. I think any guy that listens to this would be like, holy crap, that's shit, right? But at the same time, what we're trying to get to is the men's health aspect of that we're boiling this down of, hey, there's
an issue.
There's anxiety. Yeah. There's a lot of things that come with this.
Yeah, you're covering up insecurities. There's so much with it.
Right.
And so that's the point. That's a good point to make to a lot of men, because I know I get that a lot. I know I'm in a unique, very few amount of men out there that crack that code on how to hook up online. I mean, unfathomable. I've forgotten about most things that most guys probably fantasize about. And again, that's not a brag, because now we'll get into the dark, seedy part of it. And, where's the real damage? Because most guys are going to say, that's fucking great. Why would I ever want to settle down with a woman? It's like, if I can go get laid anytime I want, if I can have a woman over here anytime I want and have her leave whenever I want, instead of having somebody here that I don't want and can't get rid of them. Those are all the stories I made in my brain of why would I ever get married and everything? But after, 20 years, another pun intended, it was just drip, drip, drip of this conditioning of my brain subconsciously. And so I got to that point of I'm numb. What's going on? There's got to be more than this. There's got to just be more to life and pleasure in relationships. I had a couple relationships and I am proud to say I've never cheated on a girlfriend when I was in a relationship. I was in that moment. And sex was always ended up in me having to finish with, jerking off. When it started to turn the tide was I dated a girl. This was probably in my early 30s to mid 30s. Amazing girl. She was one girl that everybody was after at the country bar. She was attractive. She was smart, and all this. Well, she and I started dating. And I thought, I'm in heaven here. when we started having sex all the time, and I'm going and going and going as I normally do and going, and I'd have to finish over and jerk off. Well, after about a month of going out, I could kind of sense something changing in her. Like I said, hey, let me know. I'm not a stalkerish kind of guy. If you're not feeling it, let me know. No, everything's great. Okay. She's like, I like it when a guy's into me and giving me a flower or dropping a card off, whatever it might be, doing all the things that you think you should be doing. One day she just disappears. Just stops returning my calls. I checked with a couple of people. Oh, yeah, she's fine. So, make sure she was still around. I didn't stalk. I didn't check her out. I'm like, but that started playing on my head. So in my head, what did I do? That's always the ego coming back. What did I do? Couldn't have nothing to do with her. You never know. But ran into her 2 years later. So in that 2 year time, that's when a lot of damage set in. I finally ran into her again. I said, what happened? And she said, it got to me after a while that you couldn't orgasm from sex. I really thought something was wrong with me, and I just wasn't enough for you. And that was really the first time I equated what I was doing to the consciousness and careness of the other person. And then I started becoming, very subconscious and insecure around it, to the point where if I was having sex with a woman, I knew I wasn't going to orgasm and she's going to feel bad about it. All of a sudden in my mind, that's when erectile dysfunction started sitting in, because I don't even want to have sex because I know I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to disappoint her. I'm going to disappoint myself. In a nanosecond, sexual arousal, libido went out the window. And so when I started getting inside, so here was the double-edged sword. Was I enjoyed having all this fun out of it. I'm meeting hot women, hooking up all the time, but something's missing out. Let me try this dating thing. So I start dating, and those vulnerabilities, those insecurities start popping up, to then maybe the girl doesn't like you or it doesn't work out or whatever reason. So your fear of getting hurt. But I started getting small tastes of what real intimacy was in a couple of relationships. That real connection and bonding with a woman, those secret, those inside jokes that you have together, those stories that you have around each other, watching Breaking Bad, for an entire, all 6 seasons with a girl and having that bond. And so I started to really get what intimacy was. And then I said, I want to start dating. I would like to try this out. And I got to the point where I met a girl. It was on a long distance. It was actually over a Christmas break, 2014. Met her in San Diego. Fell in love with this girl. She was great. We started as a hookup. She's 10 years older than I was. Beautiful, beautiful Asian woman. 10 years older, looked like she was 15 years younger.
Yeah.
And so, but it was all about the hookup. She was very sexual. We were hooking up for the entire Christmas break. When we came back, she said, hey, would you mind if I flew out and saw you? And my best friend gave me some advice, have fun, repeat. I said, sure, come on out. And so we started dating long distance. She had frequent flyer miles, so I was really seeing her almost every weekend, more often than you would think for somebody on a long distance relationship. And to Phoenix, and she had buddy passes. I could fly back and forth. Literally every weekend I was seeing her for 3 or 4 days back and forth. And then I really fell in love with her. And that's when the collapse of my sexual system just fell. I had no desire, no libido, no sexual attraction, sexual dysfunction, couldn't get erections, all of that inside the relationship. After a period of time, she thought I was cheating on her. She was thinking all kinds of things. And that's when I kind of started linking my life of sex. And again, I still hadn't even equated it to the porn at that point in time. It was just my life of crazy, weird sex, that having, vanilla sex with somebody just wasn't interesting. But in reality, what had happened is my brain completely disconnected and disassociated real human intimacy from sexual attraction and sexual pleasure. It created a chasm in that, where the ideal point is they're locked 1-on-1. And so it was that time where I reached out to a bunch of friends of mine in Arizona. We kind of had this men's group. It was a fitness group, but we kind of started this thing called the Band of Brothers. We'd meet once a month. And I wrote this real long email. I keep meaning to put it up on my website, of just reaching out to all these guys and saying, hey, on the surface, this is why we said we broke up. We said it was long distance. It wasn't working out. But in reality, something's wrong with me. Like I can't have sex. I don't want to have sex. And I know you all know me as the guy who goes off and has all this crazy sex in the world. I can't have sex with just one person. And I lost all intimacy and arousal. And it wasn't in a state of being a victim. It was just say, here's what's going on. And I don't know what's going on. And that was the first time in my life where I shared and really experienced vulnerability. And that was where I learned was kind of the key, because when I shared that with a bunch of friends of mine, they all reached out to me. Out of 30 guys, maybe 24 sent a private email back. I'm going to edit here. Maybe I have to, because the dogs might start going nuts.
Okay.
I think she's home.
We'll see how crazy it gets, and we'll just keep moving.
Puppers.
Yeah. So I hear him whining. Okay, let me get the concentration here. So they started reaching out to me and said, Bill, I've experienced similar things, and I can't get aroused by my wife, or I go through these moments, and this for the first time, you really feel like a friend, like I really know you. So I was rewarded by vulnerability. And that's when a friend came out and he sent me a link. It's called The Great Porn Experiment on YouTube. Look it up. Gary Wilson talks about it, and he's got a book called Your Brain on Porn. And it talks about the great porn experiment, about all of this, and saying that how porn is affecting your brain and all these things that we talked about. And for me, what scared me most is saying that even if you stop porn, for men of my age who went through the same experience, the similar type of porns, it could take anywhere from 6 months to a year for my brain to retrain, even if I stopped that day. I thought, holy crap, that's a long time. And thank goodness in my story, but I'll fast forward. It still wasn't until a few, maybe about a year later, where I really realized, okay, I'm going to try this, the no porn thing. I moved back to Denver. It wasn't working out. I shouldn't say it wasn't working out. I was working. I fell back into the routine of porn. And it was one last relationship that I had here in Denver where the same thing happened. And then I finally realized at that point that I am never going to have the future that I want and deserve because of porn, because I want that real connection and human intimacy with another human being, let alone as many people as I can think of. When I say intimacy, again, not just sexual intimacy with a significant other, but real connection, intimacy with just another human being. I only wanted one. And not realizing that it was going to open my world up to having connection, intimacy with everybody in your life, which is just amazing. But it was that moment where I said, porn is not going to allow me the future I want and deserve. And so that was the day I quit porn.
Wow.
And it was, people say, well, then you weren't really an addict because you stopped on that day at that revelation. And I teach in my programs and talking to men that, listen, there's a lot that has to go into it. You have to do a lot of self-development. You're changing your perception, your mindset. Becoming present is the big thing that I really talk about and coach men to the state of living life in a present state of being, because in that moment, that's where all possibilities happen. You're not living in the future. You're not living in the past. And so you're not tied to these addictions and these perceptions and the ego and all that kind of stuff. So that's the place I had to get to. And it took years of different things. So it's great that people watch these motivational videos and do all the self-development, but the missing piece is going to have to be stop watching porn. And once you do that, all those things start making more sense and they'll really come together.
You made a really solid point there. Some people will say, oh, you're not an addict. And they kind of downplay what addiction really is when they're saying you're not really an addict. But there are plenty of people who, and there's, I've heard multiple stories of people that smoke cigarettes for 20 years. And then all of a sudden one day they have a life-changing event and they just quit. Mm-hmm. They're very rare. It's probably a very small percentage of the population that does smoke cigarettes, or the population that's dependent on drugs and alcohol. And some of them, like, there's a lot of older guys that maybe they have grandchildren now that they really out with. So they ditch the cigarettes, ditch the drugs, ditch the alcohol. And so it seems like in your experience, you had an epiphany of, well, I'm not going to get what the value out of a human connection unless I quit porn.
Yeah.
I think is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. The pain in the moment finally had to supersede everything else. And the pain of what I was going to lose in the future had to supersede what any thought of pleasure or moment compulsion was going to be. And again, it goes back to having done many other things in my life to where I was ready for it. I was just ready at that point in time. Now, not to say it was all roses afterward, because the other addictions fell in, my body was out of whack. But after a month, I started seeing the noticeable effects of just being connected, colors, sights. There's so many things that you just start enjoying more of. But I still had these stresses. I still had things, and I started masking it with other things like more energy drinks, more caffeine, a lot of other stuff slipped into my life that I didn't realize was replacing that. And so I tell guys, like, listen, you can do this on your own. Anybody can do this on their own. It might take you years and decades. My goal is to hopefully help you do it in a matter of weeks and months, is to kind of put the systems in place to help you, guide you through, and give you all the tools on how to get through this. Because nobody should have to wait that long. And going way back to one of your initial questions of why is this happening to men? Because, men are in that constant state of being young in their teens and 20s, to where, as we've said it a couple of times already, dopamine is always looking for the faster way for a new reward. That's just what's going on. And you have to completely retrain that brain for delayed gratification as opposed to instant gratification. And there's so many factors that go into play on this. And a lot of my coaching revolves very little around stopping porn. Again, it goes back to connection and becoming present. And social media, and there's everything in our life today is designed to keep us living in the future, whether it's 50 years, 5 years, or 5 minutes. We are living in the future at almost every given point of our time. And when you can practice that mindset, maybe meditation, whatever you want to call it, there's different ways. I'm not like a really hippie shaman guru type of guy. I'm like a white collar, conservative guy that does this, that figured how to get to this place of being present.
That's actually a very big yoga philosophy, is being present in the moment, because you're there and you are actually your existence, like our existence right now. We're toeing this fine line between being in the present and in the future all the time. Like you're kind of just there, right? But it's not, too much of a future. It's like within seconds, but being present with friends and partners, instead of, oh, hey, my friends invited me to a bonfire this weekend, but I'm going to sit here and stare at my phone the entire time. And I think that's kind of a very similar point that you make, is like, well, then don't go to the bonfire if you're going to sit and stare at your phone.
Right? Yeah.
I call it a moment like a self-realization. That way kind of applies to everything. It's not, you have to think about others involved, think about what you're doing, your goals in life. It's not necessarily like your own concerns, others' concerns. It's like you need to live in that moment. And I think it comes from a lot of different things in life can inspire this. So sometimes, it's like an addiction kind of thing. You've had some kind of, life battle, and it got you to this point. It could have been like a physical thing, like you've had like a near-death experience, an accident, you've been to combat, things like that. You've had something where it happened. You need to realize that life is short. We need to live in this moment. You have to kind of focus on how things are, and it kind of helps realign, at least like realign you and what you want to do. Now, it's not going to be 100%. There's always deviations. We know how that stuff goes. But I feel like that self-realization of like who you are, issues you may have, and things like you may need to be concerned about plays a big part into it.
Cam, you were so on spot with what that means. And I don't want to take this lightly, and I really we'll press this home, because people say, oh, cliche, living in the moment, right? It's on bumper stickers on the time. Yeah. It is as you said, a real self-actualization, because here's what happens in the moment. Your body and your being really separate when you're in the moment, when you're in that moment of being present. And you then are really connected to the universe and everything around you, and you disconnect from your ego. Yep. Your ego's still there. And that's when you start to realize that your ego is not you. Your self-realization, your self-identity is not who you are, and who you're being in the core of who you are is. And a lot of my coaching is peeling back the layers and getting to people to do that, because what happens in the moment of being present, you know, in the introduction of my course, I talk about a teeter-totter on a pyramid. That tip of that pyramid is that balancing point, right? And that is present. That very tip is the moment of being present. And if you can stand on that point, that teeter-totter just weighs weightless on the sides. Now, if you walk to the left side, which you'll call the past, or walk to the right side of that teeter-totter, the present, that thing tips and scales, and now you're actually living in those moments. You're living in the future, which generally creates anxiety, or you walk the other side, you're living in the past, which is depression. I'm sorry, or is it, depression, anxiety, and they can exchange. But when you can stand in the moment, in the present, and truly exist and be, just be is how I say it, you can now look at that end of the teeter-totter while it's still balanced, and you can create possibility for the future. You can always create possibility in the exact moment and being present. And when you create a possibility, you can now see what is capable for the world around you. And you can start creating it right there in the present. And you can also, instead of walking backwards into the past where you have anxiety, depression, and all this, you know, all these stories that you live in, you can now look back to the past as opposed to stepping down that teeter-totter. You stay balanced, you look back. And now when you look back, you can look back and see it with compassion and gratitude as opposed to resentment and regret.
Oh yes, my big thing is like when you look back, you want to be able to see something to grow from. Like I'm new to this whole podcast series. Technology really itself I'm kind of new to, but so I got all kinds of problems. I'm on that whole like spectrum of issues. But the idea is that you want to grow. You want to see what's around you, and you want to see what you can, how you can benefit it, how you want to help others, how you want to develop things, grow stuff, produce things. And a big part of that is looking back, recognizing that there is maybe some issues, there's some wrong turns taken, and how can we like take the next appropriate turn to make that better and hopefully help others grow from that. That's like a big thing of what we do, what we want to do with the men's health movement. We started is like, we don't like to look at that. We don't like to see the issues that occurred and like they need to be fixed. Like we want to fix things, but like things that happened in the past, we like to think they happened in the past. Mm-hmm. But that's something that we can help others with. It's knowledge, you know, it's that, what is that, what they call it? The wisdom, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But the easy word, the wisdom that pass on to others.
Well, in what you're doing is you start looking at the past, and it's very perceptive, Cam, that you're looking at. I mean, and that's why I love what you guys are doing here. Is one of the things that we do, and I'll challenge you guys to think about this, is we create our identities from in our world. Our identity is who we are. That's what most people would agree to, and it's not a far-fetched thing to say that our identity is created by the sum of all experiences that have happened to us in the past. Is that something you would say most people would agree to?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So now think about that, though. When you're young, something happens to you. You create meaning to that. You start building these perceptions about the world, the way that the world shows up to you. I always go to worst case scenario. For example, you're raped when you're young or molested or something like that. And now that the world for the rest of your life shows up as the world is unfair. You can't trust people. People are out to take advantage of you. I have to control the world, whatever it might be. You know, for me, the self-limiting belief that evolved around me was, you know, I'm not good enough and I don't matter. So I approached the world seeking out things that would make that reality be true. And realizing, and then it was also, you know, my identity was, you know, I'm an introvert, you know, I'm kind of shy, I'm charming, you know, people like me. And so I would use all these pieces of my identity to approach life. But what happens is you start approaching life with a very limited filter of the experiences of your past. If you can flip this inside and out and upside down and realize that you can erase your identity of the past, not based upon the things that have happened to you, but based on the possibility that you're creating for the future and what your identity needs to be to make that real and empowering. At that point in time, when you're living in the moment, you can actually be whatever it is you need to be to create and make that possibility and bring it to fruition.
Exactly.
Very nice, Bill. It seems like you had quite the journey in life,
Yep.
and your story is like really fascinating. I mean, you've kind of gone from both ends of the spectrum, but then now you've seen that you have the opportunity to help people.
Hmm.
I think that's men's health, not
Yeah.
just our stuff, but like just the term men's health is, well, what can we do to help people? And it kind of starts off like, all right, well, there's pharmacy, there's,
Hmm.
regular health, there's prostate cancer, erectile dysfunction, heart disease. We can hit on all those things, say, hey, stop smoking. Hey,
Right.
Definitely get you.
yeah, but a huge component is like this mental aspect and these really niche components to life, like porn. I mean,
Hmm.
this, you might, I don't know how many people have this issue. I know it's a serious issue. If I have friends telling me like, hey, you guys need to talk
Millions of
Yeah.
people.
right? And I'm sure it's you where it was, well, porn isn't the problem. I mean, there's other things that are probably leading to this. But a lot of people say that about, again, drugs and alcohol
Yeah.
or other
Yeah.
behavioral, like gambling, things like that, like behavioral
Yeah.
issues that really attack someone's
Right.
life. Um,
I'll
but
share with you what a lot of men share with me, and it did happen in my life as well. Again, it's a manifestation of many things. It can take on many different aspects of people's lives. A lot of times, it can turn into drugs, to alcohol, to perfectionism, workaholic, porn, whatever it might be. But it resolves and develops into the state where any addiction becomes that place that you can hide. You can
That
fall back
disassociation.
and hide. Exactly. You start feeling these levels of anxiety or uncertainty, vulnerability. Usually that's the biggest one, and boredom's also the other one. But vulnerability, when you start hitting these levels, you can resort back to porn because nobody knows, and it suppresses any of those negative emotions that are starting to rise that you don't know how to deal with. And so going back to the identity aspect, a lot of people, because I ask men two questions when I'm doing my research. Is one is, what do you fear most if you don't stop watching porn? And you usually get the typical answers: I could lose my job, I'm never going to have a relationship, I'm going to be numb, and all this. But the piece about that, when you ask it, is most guys have gone through this long enough that they've already accepted that. They know what the negative outcome is going to be, but they've already internalized and accepted that. And then the next question I will ask is, what are you most afraid of if you do stop watching porn? And that's where people start to really think, because they haven't examined that yet. And what it comes down to is they realize they're going to lose their safety net, their security blanket. And one person was so boldly to say, I'm afraid that I'm going to lose my identity when I stop porn, or if I stop porn, because it's been a part of his life forever. And so that's part of the coaching. You have to get to that point where you can be vulnerable in a space of not hiding, and learn how to be vulnerable, and be vulnerable as a strength, not as in the state of victimhood. And when you can breach that gap and eventually you start becoming present and connecting with other people, those porn and those other addictions and compulsive behaviors start to just disappear. So it's not a cold turkey thing, because you found new meaning associated, empowering meaning to your life and to things that you want to accomplish, that pull you forward. Call it a purpose or a calling. For me, for years, my identity was this guy that could hook up all the time. Bill's a guy with all the crazy stories. I look up to him. He can pull off the impossible with women or whatever it might be. Like, that was my identity. I had to give that up and create a new identity of being a loving, fiance, husband, person, connected, full of love and compassion. And so I created that possibility and lived into that. And so I created a new identity, but there was a lot of fear around letting go of that identity. Like, who am I going to be? If I'm not Bill, this guy that hooks up all the time with these crazy stories, who am I going to be?
Oh yeah, big part of this. A lot of times, like, guys, ladies, other people, they all forget about who they are, like what they want to do, what their hobbies are, what they're interested in. They kind of lose themselves in that moment. Like, I always imagine, I don't imagine, like, I understand that for people, we find something that kind of helps us separate. We get to dissociate from the real world. I don't think it's like a societal thing. It's a natural thing. Like, we want to dissociate from the society we've created. It happens. And sometimes some outlets, most of the time, the outlets we pick are the worst kinds. There's oftentimes I'll find myself just in the garage. I like to dissociate with projects. I'm working on stuff. My hands are busy. I'm doing work. And I'll find myself in the garage just standing there. And I'm not doing anything, but I'm in the garage. I'm in the workplace. I got my air tools. I got, the car or whatever. And this is like my idea of like freedom in a sense. It's my idea where I don't have to look at the real world. I don't have to focus on myself and things like that. It's the same idea. You're finding an area, and it's a lot of things a lot of people struggle with.
And that you're becoming the complete master and creator of your own world in that moment.
Exactly.
And that's what I really get guys to do. And one of my exercises is I tell guys, find the one thing that you are the very best in the world at. And somebody approached me with that challenge a couple of years ago. And I said, I'm good at a lot of things, but I'm not very best in the world at anything. Like, I'm mediocre, and at best I might be somewhat of an authority on something. I'm a film editor, wasn't the best film editor, directed and produced, wasn't the best. But take that and narrow down your parameters around that to whatever you want to be. So there you are, you're beginning to create, you're defining what best in the world means. When I was in such a dark place, after I got my dog, I got my dog to pull me out of the opioid addiction because I needed something to focus on. And he saved me. I didn't rescue him. He rescued me. And so I got to the point, like, what am I very best in the world at? I'm the very best dog dad to Gavin in my basement.
I love being a dog dad.
Yeah. And so I defined what I was very best in the world at. And there's a lot of power in that moment. Say, okay, the best dog dad to my dog in my basement. I mean, I narrowed it down. Like, I will play with my dog in the basement. Nobody else in the entire world can ever be better at creating a connection with my dog than me in that moment in my basement. And I'm like, fuck yeah, that's powerful. And so then you start expanding that to the rest of your world. You are the creator of being the most powerful person that you are and the best that you are in the best in the world. That doesn't mean that other people can't do it differently or other ways around it. And doesn't mean that just because you don't have all the knowledge around in it, if you're learning about it. A year ago, if I would have told you that I was the very best in the world at helping guys stop porn, I would have said, no, there's other guys out there that are doing it. I've talked to all the coaches. I've talked to everybody. I've paid to have counseling with them to see what they're talking about, what they're doing. In a short year, I know I'm the very best in the world at it. I just know it. And I hope to God that the other men that are doing it think the same thing.
Big dick energy.
Yeah, that is the only way that we can make it possible to make a difference. And there's a few guys out there. So whether it's me or somebody else, find a coach, find somebody that has gone down this path. And, I often say it's not our job to take anybody's pain away. I fell down that rut many times, like just trying to help people and forcing my help upon people. And my fiance would argue that I still do that. And, but you have to look at yourself like a lighthouse. You were there with that solid base and that foundation of who you are, knowing what you are, that you're there to provide guidance and shine a light. That is what you do. It is not your job to jump out and get in the boat and steer it for that person. Because the second you do, you're now at risk at going down with that boat as well. And so living a life in such a manner that provides value to, and so that goes back to your point earlier, Patrick, about where kind of my epiphany is I never had shame around this and I never had regret. I think I might have mentioned that. What I did have in my 30s was resentment, because I started resenting the fact that even though I've done all this cool stuff, it is now causing me problems. Never regretted it because I love the stories. I absolutely love them.
Oh yeah, the GOAT.
But that moment, and it actually happened on New Year's Eve last year. That was my epiphany, my awakening moment, New Year's Eve last year, where I finally realized, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I have no manner. I have no procedure around this, but I have the roadmap. It's bumpy, trial and error a little bit, but I can shine it and give that roadmap to men to get on the other side of it. And that second, that resentment turned to gratitude in 1 nanosecond. And it was just a flush over me that this is my purpose. This is my calling. Wasn't my passion. I can tell you that. I have a video on that, but that's when I realized that this is my calling and my purpose. And I can never go back to doing anything else anything else.
Bill, this has been phenomenal. This has honestly been like one of my favorite podcasts that I've done.
Yay, me
I was
too.
looking forward to it.
We cut loose. We had a good time. You know, we had some good stories. And then also really just talked about men's health in a different way than probably we ever have. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
To close out a little bit, can you remind everybody where they can get a hold of you?
Where can they find you?
Yeah, where can they find you? And then I will post that in anytime we post it.
Best place, YouTube, search my name, Bill Ranshaw. You'll have the spelling of my name.
Yes, sir.
Just search me on YouTube. Sometimes I change my title. Right now it's called The Connected Being, Bill Ranshaw. That's what my current YouTube channel is. Otherwise, go to my website, which is Bill Wilderment, BILLWILDERMENT.org. And so I want to give a couple takeaways to some guys right now, because I know they're saying, okay, great, there's an hour long at this. You know, what do I do? What are the first freaking things that I can do? First thing is go to my website and sign up. I am giving free coaching to men who sign up for my research project that I'm working on right now. It's completely anonymous. I'll spend maybe 1 or 2 sessions with you and give you some real strategies to get you going in the right direction. But one of those is moving into the new year's is it really becomes a system of systems. You want to start looking at creating a morning ritual that I call Conquer the Morning, which was kind of stolen by Brene Brown, which is because she has Win the Morning, but creating a system in the morning that you get up, that's going to solid, which involves, some stretching exercises, some gratitude that goes along with that, creating one thing for the day that you have to get done and place life or death, emphasis on that, make your bed and something else that cleans and clears the space around you. And then you can build from there. And so start building systems into place. I also talk about starting with one, let somebody know, let a close friend know that this is going on in your life. If you're not comfortable do that, again, reach out to me, let me know. The other one is start practicing just connection and exercises. Take the focus away from stopping porn and looking at how can I connect better with human beings. And the number one way I do that I tell people is start practicing gratitude. On my YouTube, I have a video called Take the Compliment, and it talks about 3 levels of gratitude that people can do. And the last takeaway on that, the first one is Gratitude 101, journaling things you're thankful for. Gratitude 102 is going out and expressing gratitude to other people without expectation of how they're going to respond. You can show thanks to people, open a door, but if they don't say thank you, don't get mad. Just do it and show gratitude for somebody. And the last one is, how do you receive gratitude in your life? Start examining that piece of your life, because that's where most people drop the ball. Somebody pays you a compliment, they thank you, we immediately dismiss it. We say, don't worry about it, no big deal, it's what I do, whatever it might be. You always dismiss when other people are paying you compliments and giving you gratitude. And that's doing 2 things. That is, we can edit that. That is dismissing your own self-worth, and that is robbing somebody else the gift of giving you gratitude and compliments. It's just like somebody giving you a gift at Christmas and you say, take it back. So that's where I tell people to start practicing gratitude. I got a video that talks about it. And then I've got a dopamine detox video that's very technical and tells you how to do something like that too.
Yeah, that's all. Don't worry about it. That's like big. A lot of us say don't worry about it. And we think it's an equivalent response, and it's not. It's a discounting response, and it's a big thing that a lot of companies, a lot of people, a lot of things are trying to focus on. It's a discounting thing. So very good. Yeah, appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you, Bill. We'll make sure to include all that stuff in anything that we post to this. This really has been a very powerful interview. I mean, we went from one side of the coin. We traveled.
We threw that coin away. That coin is gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Make it fun. That's my gift, man. I make it comfortable. Make a tough conversation just conversation.
Yeah, and it should be. And I think that's where men's health needs to be. Is I think we had another interview a couple days ago, and we interviewed a couple of doctors, and they're like, "What do you guys think about men's health?" And I'm like, "Well, if you don't really have the barber mentality, being able to go and hang out at the doctor's office and just kind of have that moment of, yes, I'm here to be healthy, and I'm here to, I'm here for a purpose. I'm here to find out what's going on. I want to be here for my family.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just think that that's where men's health kind of is. So thank you so much. I mean, you really hit a lot of the points. It's your own personal story. It's your experience. It's your calling, but also it all comes back to men's health.
Yeah.
That's like, I just want to thank you so much. And like, we got to do this again. That was a lot of fun.
Hey, call me up anytime. There's other subjects I love to talk about. There's stuff we can go into, so we'll be in touch. And thank your viewers. I want to let them know that they're worth it. They're worth putting the work in. That they mean something to the world.
Absolutely.
Do that. I think it'd be great if we get a moment, we get like a session we could riff and just kind of BS back and forth. That's good for people. It's good for setting that comfortable environment.
You guys tell me when.
All right.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
All right. We still recording? Keep this recording. We still good?
I'm stopping recording.
No, keep it going for a second.
All right, go ahead.
All right. We want to remind you guys, you need to be yourself. Think about how you're doing your things and how you want to improve your life. Think about your goals. Think about your ambitions and think about those around you. Let's get this shit done. Right, boys?
I like it.
Fire. All right.
Good job, Cam. I like it.
Yeah, that was good.